Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome on into today's edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm Kaylee Nix here with Anthony Smith.
That's right, and on this Thursday edition, we have such a show lined up for you. We're going to have On the Spot segment with our very own Tony Mulvey, and FreightWaves TV has another new show to unveil today, so stay tuned for that. But first, our top story brings us to a topic that was big in the beginning of 2022 and still seems to be in 2023. Grace Sharkey is here to talk about it with us. Grace, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you guys. Haven't seen you since 2022, so happy to see you today.
It's been a whole year, Grace. I still haven't seen you since last year. But we're glad.
I know, I've had it in my pocket since yesterday, so.
Funny. We're glad to have you here on the show. And it's interesting, right? Because we're talking about real-time visibility. And I feel like every year we have a different buzzword, right? Like it's visibility one year, it's connectivity the other. Talk to us a little bit about visibility and if it still matters as much this year as it did last year.
Oh, it definitely still matters as much as it did this time last year and over the last couple of years. I mean, this is the connective tissue to everything that we truly need to make a lot of even the other technologies coming out of this space work today. I think what's people second glance at it because of a number maybe of layoffs, less valuations, different style of raising money. But I think honestly, if you look at any industry and what they went through last year, it's a lot, especially technology-wise, it's a lot of the same patterns. So the reason I really wanted to touch on that and focus on that in that recent article is I think a lot of people are questioning the valuations of these different companies because of these different moves. But I wanted to point out that a lot of this is just business, and it's something that's happening at every business across the nation today. Anyone in technology or that's providing some type of tech solution should realize the market that they're in today compared to the market that we saw coming out of 2020 into 2021.
And Grace, when we're talking about that visibility aspect, I know it's a huge factor that really was a big deal in 2021, 2022, still a big deal now. Do you see there's any type of balance between visibility and speed? Because I know sometimes just in my personal life, I don't really care if it's going to take, a week, maybe even 2 weeks, but at least if I know where the package is or if it's pending, if it's been shipped, what's going on. Do you see that balance being there at all on the business side for logistics of, hey, it's okay if it's not as fast, but at least let me know where it is?
Yes, I think that is the next step that we're all focused on going into 2023. There's a lot of companies that have incredible amounts of data running through them now on different modes of transportation. And now it's the point where we need to start making sure that we're adding value tools that tell us where things are. I think a great company that's kind of spinning off in that nature is a company called Stock in Motion, right? They've actually been on the show before. And their goal, and they just started working with a number of retailer selling solutions, is to allow the user to log on. Let's say you're on Dix.com, right? And you want to buy a new baseball bat, but it says it's sold out. But instead of selling that it's sold out, it'll tell you where that stock is in the actual supply chain of Dix at the time. So that's kind of a perfect way of looking at where the next step of visibility is going to, and then pushing off and from there into a bigger scheme of things to the point where we're in an area where we can have digital twins of our supply chain, right? And be able to choose different suppliers or at least look into different suppliers and immediately be able to tell how that will adjust our full supply chain, days for delivery, et cetera. So that's what I think we'll see more in 2023 is a lot of the cool technologies that are going to be spinning off from the big amount of data sets that are coming through a lot of these companies.
So now you're talking about, instead of just having visibility into where this thing is, oh, it doesn't exist, now you build in a layer of redundancy to figure out, okay, this is my second, third, fourth option if I know that what I want or what I need isn't exactly where I thought it was going to be. When we talk a lot about this tech environment, we know obviously it's kind of a hard time, right? As you mentioned, we've seen layoffs, we see kind of a rework of the way that funding is being done right now. How do you think that this looks going forward into the next year when it comes to fundraising? Some of these companies might now have to fight with a harder tooth and nail to get that valuation and to get that fund, right?
Yeah, and I think especially the report that Solomon did yesterday on C.H. Robinson, right? How a lot of analysts are looking at that and how they're looking at the economy. I don't see the trend of layoffs ending soon, at least until we can know for certain that the economy, at least the consumer spending, is bouncing back compared to what we're seeing today. So every leader I talked to in the space, no one said that, hey, there's going to be no layoffs in the future. And I think that's unfair to any tech company in this space, and especially how tech companies are doing on Wall Street as well, to say that that's a possibility. But it's an option out there if they need to remain lean. I mean, unfortunately, it's a business move that many businesses have to say, do we want to come out of this as a profitable company and is still providing value solutions to our customers? Well, unfortunately, there might be people that need to be let go during that transition. So again, I don't want to look at it as a trend showcasing that maybe the value of these companies has fallen. Like, when I say value true, I mean the true value of the products that they're giving. Instead, it's about long-term or longevity in this space, and making sure that you're staying lean where you need to stay lean to come out the other end as a bigger player than you were going into it.
Right on the head there. I mean, you definitely have to be offering a legitimate solution and not just another copycat tech or anything like that. We're looking at the tech that we're seeing right now, especially with visibility and all these different initiatives. Do you see any collaboration or crossover with other initiatives within the supply chain, really kind of starting to think about emissions really being one of the big things that we're seeing pushed to the forefront? Do we see any kind of linking there?
Yeah, I think that's going to be another trend that we see throughout 2023 is a lot of partnerships in order to offer a little bit more value in areas that these companies aren't yet. And in particular, too, in regards to ESG initiatives, a lot of these companies work for the big Fortune 500s and ones that are going to need to be reporting to the SEC and Wall Street on what exactly their emission statuses are. And this is a big deal for anyone in the supply chain. I actually am more concerned with a lot of the small carriers out there and small logistics providers who aren't completely set up to offer those reports to the big companies that they're working with. But even more so, these companies, I think, are going to help. The real-time visibility companies are going to help big time in order to allow those companies to start reporting that to the SEC. It's going to be mandatory, most likely this year. So for them to make sure that they're partnered with companies that can offer deep insight into even scope 3, which I believe, if it didn't make the article, I think speaking with Jet McCandless over at P44, one thing he mentioned is in order to do that, you're going to have to be a global company, and you're going to have to be able to report every single mode that's available out there. And so there's one area, if you want to kind of look at the competitors out there and compare who would be better at that situation, it's going to be the ones who have a larger global footprint than those who just are more focused on like truckload visibility than anything else.
So Grace, you mentioned P44, who's obviously like the big name player in the visibility space right now. Super recognizable, super big things coming out of them with Jet at the helm. Do we have any indication on if we could see maybe some reach down the supply chain from groups like P44, maybe reaching down, acquiring, or working with some of those smaller visibility groups to really kind of make this collaborative solution?
Yeah, it wasn't anything mentioned in particular of it, but I think that's something that you'll start seeing. Whenever I see a partnership, I immediately assume that's a gap in their own structure that they have. So as we start to see these partnerships take shape, we'll have a better idea of maybe where each of the players out there were missing that downstream reporting. But I think in terms of the ones that are more global are going to have a better chance of having that reporting, especially, I mean, look at even the ability to report on European carriers is a huge step as well. So I think we'll start seeing more of that through partnerships, or at least that question will be answered through partnerships as 2023 goes along.
And Grace, as we move forward throughout this year, do you see mergers and acquisitions also being a really big part of this potentially?
Oh, most definitely. And so sometimes I, at least the last year and the last 6 months, I've been looking more at a lot of these big raises as opportunities, right, to go out there and grab some of these companies, as likely they will be more cost efficient to acquire than they have in the past. And we're already seeing the action in truckload. I mean, especially Ford Air yesterday. I think we're going to see a lot of that happening in this space as well in 2023.
It's going to be interesting to watch for sure, Grace, and we know that you will have your finger on the pulse of it all. Thank you for joining us today. We will catch you up later this week.
Thank you, guys. Have a good morning.
Right now, we're going to head over to the wall for our first carrier update of the morning.
Welcome into this first carrier update of the morning. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Donnie Gilbert. Donnie, going to start looking a little further upstream. You're going to start looking at what's happening in the ocean market, because ultimately it leads to what's going to happen here in the trucking market.
A big change. We saw the big change in the ocean markets earlier last year now. Mm-hmm. And that told us it was a great representation here to show us when we were going to have a big drop. Mm-hmm. Well, if we see a big rise, then hopefully that's going to be in the opposite. So I want everybody to keep an eye on these, on our TEU volume index for that reason. Now, here, right now we're flirting with this, 100 mark right here. The troughs probably need to be, the bottom of the trough here would probably need to be around 150 or a little bit higher to get us back on track where we need to be, but that's not the case right now. So keep an eye on this. You see they've dropped down, they've kept dropping down. And here in December, we saw a little bit of an increase, but not enough to really do anything. These will be here in about a month. So here at the end of January, these will be arriving. But again, it's not a whole lot to write home to mom about. Yep, and you got Lunar New Year a little later this month. So that always, I shouldn't say always provides a bump, but it does. It's that time that if you were going to expect a bump in TEUs, that would be when you'd see it. We would see it in this right before the Lunar New Year, obviously, to get here in February and early March. Unfortunately, we don't need a bump. We need it just to an overall increase and to sustain that increase. Yep. But yeah, you're right. We will see that bump, so watch out for that bump. But you'll see it here first. And this is using all imports to the U.S. is what the graph that I am looking at right now. Now let's go to the next chart forward here. And this is the bookings. Well, this is disappointing right here. We see just after Christmas, ocean bookings going straight down. Yep. So again, this is a foreshadow of what's going to come in January and February. It's not looking good. Yeah, and that's the concerning, right? Because this is even more upstream than the TEU index, because that's after they've left the port. This is when the booking is submitted to the ocean carrier. So, I mean, you're talking 8, 10, 12 days in advance. And we're seeing this number fall. This should be rising for Lunar New Year. So we used about 14 days for the advancement. Mm-hmm. This has dropped to 7 days. Yep. The average pre-booking is now 7 days. And what that tells me is there's not a whole lot going on, so they don't need to book it really far in advance. Exactly. So that's another sign of how weak the imports have gotten if you don't need to run out and book your capacity way in advance. If that number's falling and then bookings are falling, it just shows how weak shipping is currently. Absolutely. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll hand it over to Kaylee Nix.
Thanks, guys. Time for a first check of our top stories up on FreightWaves.com. Amazon released a report last November that suggested it could lay off around 10,000 employees in a round of peak season job cuts. And it's now coming to light that figure is expected to be way higher. The Wall Street Journal reported that people familiar with the cuts say the number will be closer to 17,000 to 18,000 employees who will lose their job. Some sources say the layoffs will mostly be in corporate office positions. This would be the largest round of layoffs in company history, would also be the largest headcount correction among tech companies that have recently trimmed their workforce. Asset-light trucking provider Air has announced it will acquire expedited LTL carrier Land Air Express for $56.5 million. The deal will add 270 employees and over 200 drivers to the Forward Air network and increase its terminal count by 25. FMCSA data lists the company with 302 power units. This will also expand the Forward Air airport-to-airport LTL network and will add 4 new markets for the company. Forward Air expects the deal to contribute between $74 and $94 million in revenue annually. And analyst reaction to the news of C.H. Robinson CEO Bob Biesterfeld leaving the company has been fairly harsh. The UBS analyst slapping a sell recommendation on company shares with an $81 per share price target. Shares closed yesterday at $90.80. Analysts at Bank of America Merrill Lynch downgraded their outlook to neutral on the stock and dropped 12-month price targets by almost $10. All analysts agree, however, that the macroeconomic weakness affecting the brokerage was out of Biesterfeld's control, along with the decline of contract rates, which account for 60% of C.H. Robinson's brokerage business. You can find details on these stories and so much more on FreightWaves.com and our FreightWaves app. And if you're watching us live on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe to stay updated. Head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for a full FreightWaves TV experience. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with a first check of weather for your day. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation.
This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our first check of the weather for your Thursday morning. Folks on the West Coast bracing for a potentially deadly storm moving on the coast of California right now. Saw it start to impact the areas from San Francisco down through Salinas yesterday, and the worst of it hitting today into the afternoon hours and eventually starting to subside a little bit overnight into tomorrow morning. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. Basically, the entire coast of California is a mess right now. So all the way up from just north of the Eureka area down all the way through San Francisco into Salinas, even down into the Los Angeles area. We've got flood watches and warnings in place. Along the coast specifically, we've got severe coastal flooding going on from onshore flow, as well as really heavy rainfall and high winds. Basically, right now, we're expecting a total of between 4 to 6 inches of rainfall from the storm. That might not seem like a whole lot over really dry ground like what you've got in California. That means we see a ton of runoff, a lot of flooding, and not a whole lot of absorption into the earth like what we need. So because of that, we've got flood warnings in place up all along the coast, flood watches a little bit more inland, high wind warnings in place as well. Some of these higher elevations could be experiencing wind gusts between about 35 to 45 miles an hour. sometimes gusts even stronger between 55 and 60. And all of this to say we could be dealing with down trees, down power lines, mudslides, flooded roadways, rock slides, basically you name it, we could get it this week in California. And the rain honestly just expected to keep on coming. And while this is pretty good news from a drought perspective, it is going to cause some really intense flooding in some of those spots. So it's just something that needs to be super careful. As that moisture moves up and over the eastern mountains of California, we'll expect that to turn into snow and then some wintry precipitation. So folks out there in the eastern half of the state also need to prepare for winter weather there. Could be looking again at some heavy snowfall from about 8 to 12 inches in some places, higher and more amounts in those higher elevations. We're going to continue to keep a watch on this storm as it continues to move throughout the rest of the week, and we'll follow up more with that here in our later looks at weather. Right now, we're going to toss things over to Christian Thomas for a look at what's trending on social media.
Thanks, Kaylee, for those weather updates. Now, today's January 5th, which means it's Screenwriters Play, and why not talk about one show that was probably a headache for a screenwriter to write, because it's a show where you can watch any episode in any order, and Netflix did just that. So I'll let somebody explain it.
So I just finished Netflix's newest banger, Kaleidoscope. And this is by far one of the most fun, unique, and creative shows that has hit any streaming service. The reason being, depending on what order you watch the episodes, your experience entirely changes. Allow me to explain. The story centers around this big heist that our characters are going to partake in, and basically each episode takes place at a specific point in time before or after the heist. The colors you see here are the different episode names, but the one major thing is you have to watch the episode named white last always, no matter what. And the crazy thing is as well, Netflix randomizes the order for you, so whatever order you get, it's completely different from the next account. And what's crazy, I didn't know that, so the unique order they gave me, I literally just watched backwards, so I had an even more unique experience. So my order ended up being pink, red, blue, orange, violet, yellow, green. And then obviously white at the end, so let's talk about it. This was a very entertaining heist show with some fun and really good performances. And Giancarlo Esposito, who is a legend. In my experience while watching it, I basically watched the story go from backwards to the beginning. I basically watched the future events transpire, and through me continuously watching, I got the context later. I learned other characters' motives, I saw how they interacted with each other and their relationships, and I saw what they became in the future, and essentially what they used to be as well.
Now, he did mention that you can watch it in any order that Netflix gave you, but Netflix put out this post here yesterday with a list of different ways you could watch it depending on how you'd like to watch it, like this order's chronological order. We got what I think is the correct order. The classic detective story, which is the way I probably will watch it. Orange is the New Black order. You got the Rainbow order. And the Tarantino film order. So there's multiple ways to watch this, and I'm pretty excited. I got a few friends going to watch it in different orders and see how it goes. And you know, with today being the Screenwriters National Day, I put this out there in college. I wrote a screenplay one time about puns. It was basically a play on words. Anyways, I'm going to toss it over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Well, we know that Christian Thomas will not be celebrating National Comedians Day because that was terrible.
I liked it. I liked it. I enjoyed it, but I am looking forward to also kind of tuning into that and just kind of seeing what unique order. But I'm also pretty sure that you might like to break the rules because I know you like to read the end of books first, so you might watch White first and then figure it all out. But
I just won't watch it at all, actually.
There's that. Yeah, you don't watch too much TV.
I don't watch TV.
All the classic
you
movies,
don't like movies.
Yeah.
I don't like TV. There you go. All right, Christian, thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and welcome in our next set of guests. We've got Mike Baudendistel and Joanna Marsh here with us. We're super excited to welcome both of them to the show because, guys, you are launching your own show today. Mike, we'll start off with you. We've got People Speaking Rail that debuts this afternoon. Talk to us a little bit about the show.
Sure. So the idea behind this show is to put the two people at FreightWaves who follow the rail industry the closest, Joanna and I, on one show. Figure the people who care about Joanna's articles are also the same people that care about what I'm seeing in the data, and we'll put this in a concise 26-minute show. This is everything you need to know on the rail industry, both on the editorial side and in the FreightWaves, sonar side. And I can incorporate some sort of anecdotes I'm hearing from some of the the clients that we talk to of their experience with moving freight and service and all of those things. I think it'll be a pretty good show. And didn't think there would be that much incremental work since we're already on top of all these issues already. We already collaborate a lot, compare notes about different issues, and really kind of. I think what spurred the idea was, you probably recall, frequently last year we had, Joanna on this show, FreightWaves Now, to, talk about an article. And then I came on immediately after to just sort of give some either, color commentary or opinion or some background or something. And I think it'll be fun and work out well.
This is definitely going to be exciting. It's something I'm going to be looking forward to. Joanna, when can we expect the first episode, and what's going to be the week or the increments? Is it going to be a weekly show, something that's going to be on a bi-weekly? What are we looking at here?
Sure. Yeah. So it's going to be later today, actually, at 3 p.m. So it's going to be on Thursdays at 3. So you can check us out then. And it is going to be a weekly show. So that's how we have it set up so far.
I love to see that. And obviously the new year brings lots of new offerings from us here at FreightWaves. We talked to Alan Adler about his truck tech show that debuted yesterday. Mike, when we're talking a little bit about the content of things, I love that you said that you kind of provide like the color commentary and the background to the editorial side that Joanna writes. When we're talking about actually using that rail data, what is some of that really important data that you guys are going to pull from Sonar and look at pretty often?
Yeah, so we have a number of different data series I think are pretty unique. So one of them is on the intermodal side. We have volume that is on a daily basis, and it gets broken down sort of any which way you want to break it down. I mean, we could break it down by just domestic or just international. I know a lot of our customers just care about more domestic than international, or they care about a specific lane or a specific region. And so sort of goes beyond what, you can get from the weekly data that comes out from the Association of American Railroads, which just provides an overall intermodal number. We'll break that down and show you certain lanes or certain things, just to check in on are certain locations getting too congested, or not. We also have data for intermodal contract rates, a data series for that, which could be an interesting one this year after 2 years of steep price increases in intermodal contract rates. Will that fall off? Also have some data on intermodal spot rates, which sort of gives you some indication of are the carriers protecting this capacity for the contracted shippers or not. So we can talk through that, and also have a lot of data that we can bring in on the ocean side, which has of course implications for intermodal volume and congestion and capacity, and then also data on the truckload side, which is important to consider when you're talking about domestic intermodal because they're so competitive, specifically right now in the lanes that tend to be more competitive.
And Joanna, when we're looking at this show, of course, it's going to be you and Mike chatting about the rail industry. Are there going to be any episodes with guests? Is this going to be something that you guys are going to incorporate, or is this going to be mostly you and Mike?
Yeah, we hope to have guests over the course of the series, and so we've been asking people to appear, and it'll be great to get those different perspectives from the industry about where they see the rail market going, and also just what sort of industry trends they might see. So yeah, we're looking forward to having different people on air with us.
So I feel like I always ask this of people as they're starting new shows because I have a dream guest list for things like FreightWaves Now and for Great Quarter Gals. But Mike, do you have anybody that you really think would be a huge asset for guests wise, and anyone that you're really looking forward to maybe trying to get on to interview?
I mean, I think anyone from the Surface Transportation Board would be really interesting. Of course, maybe the dream guest would be Marty Oberman, who's the chairman of the Surface Transportation Board, who's really been just a huge figure these past couple of years, and has taken a more proactive approach than we've seen from the Surface Transportation Board in the past. And I think it's to the shipper. It's been to the shipper's benefit, but I think the case can be made that the industry got to have too little. There's too little competition now, and the shippers haven't had enough opportunity to push back on rates when they're captive. So they've already made some pretty significant changes in terms of the data that that the railroads need to provide on service. And then there have been some significant service orders in the past several months, including one that was just happening last week, where they ordered expedited service to foster farms. And then there was another ruling to make it easier for the smaller shippers to contest rate cases that are captive to one railroad. So they've made some pretty significant changes, and more changes could come in the future.
Are there any big trends or themes that you're looking at from the rail industry, a continuation of 2022 for the most part, or something completely different?
Yeah, so I think the big theme this year is going to be service. I didn't hear the beginning of that question if that was intended for Joanna, but I think Joanna outlined it pretty well in their latest article that sort of went through a laundry list of issues, and a lot of those, I think that the sort of the commonality was service.
Joanna, you think so as well, or is there anything that you're really looking forward to covering? I know obviously the rail strike was something that was super huge as far as newsmakers goes for 2022, and we're talking again already looking shortly down the road to new negotiations. But is that something that we could be expecting to talk a lot about as well, kind of the fallout from the strike, what union members are seeing now on the other side of things, and then preparing for next set of negotiations?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a couple of issues, such as train crew size, like whether there should be a minimum number of people in a locomotive cab. I mean, that's one issue, but connected with that as well is looking at where does automation play? What role does rail technology play into operations, and where does the work-life balance fit into this? So I mean, even though it's just train crew size, you also have these other bigger themes kind of weaving through. So that's just one example, I guess, of possible things that we could look at this in 2023.
And Mike, do you anticipate any crossover? Of course, you're not just our rail intermodal expert, but also watching closely with CPG. Do you see any crossover with CPG with this show and some of the topics as well?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing would be sort of the competitiveness between intermodal and truckload. There's a lot of big CPG companies that use intermodal because, some things, you think about like one of the biggest one of the original domestic intermodal customers for a company like Hub Group was General Mills. And you think about just the sort of things they move. I mean, a lot of it maybe is not time sensitive if there's enough in inventory, or it doesn't spoil. So it could be used a lot on intermodal. So there's a lot of consumer goods that go on rail intermodal, and a lot of the times those shippers are making modal decisions between truckload and intermodal, and our data can sort of point those shippers in one direction or another, and that ties directly into a lot of these service issues that I think are really going to be maybe one of the big themes of this show this year. And we've heard from some CPG companies that say, well, they have had such bad service at times that they've had to go into the rail terminals and get those containers that were already in-gated and move them on the highway because the goods weren't going to be on shelves. So I do think there are tie-ins there.
All right, guys. Well, we are excited to see another offering here on FreightWaves TV. Thank you both so much for coming on today. We'll catch you this afternoon at 3 o'clock.
Right now, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now in a few moments.
show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Wasson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our second check of the weather here this morning. We've got lingering snow showers affecting the Great Lakes area up through Wisconsin and down into Illinois. Chicago looking at getting pretty slammed with some heavy snowfall today as well as we continue to move through the end of the week. But the good news is these snow showers should be in and out pretty quickly, eventually leaving some sunshine behind their wake, albeit with some cold air once again. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. We can see we've got the radar up and these snow showers are just slowly continuing to rotate in through the far southeastern corner of Minnesota now in through pretty much all of central Wisconsin and then down through central Illinois up through Chicago. Heaviest snowfall right now is actually right along that I-55 corridor moving from Bloomington, Illinois up into the Chicago area. So some of these interstates could be slick. You could have some traffic delays, possibly some visibility issues as well during those pockets of heavier snow. But as I mentioned, they should be moving in and out pretty quickly here today. Eventually that snowfall will rotate through, move into Indiana, Ohio, and up into Michigan today into tomorrow. Looking at not a ton of accumulation, but decent amounts of snowfall, enough just to create those driving issues and some visibility problems. Behind that, we're watching cold air once again sneak on in, but not anything like what we saw about a week and a half ago with that cold air over Christmas holiday. Just going to be normal seasonable temperatures for these folks up there, although it is considered cold for us folks here down in the south. With that, we're going to watch the snow filter on out this afternoon into this evening. More sunshine returning behind that snow until the next storm. Yes, that storm moving on the coast of California right now sets up and will set up for really our next big time winter storm across the northern plains and then the Great Lakes, moving up later on this weekend and into the start of next week. As far as snowfall amounts go, looking at maybe 2.5 to 4 inches in some places. Locally higher amounts are possible, of course, but not expecting anything too substantial as far as heavy snow goes. We'll take a couple more looks at weather coming up in our second hour of FreightWaves Now. Right now, we're going to toss it back over to Anthony Smith.
Now we're bringing on our very own Thomas Wasson, who has some updates for us. Thomas, thanks for being here this morning.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be on as always. I know it is Thursday, so we're getting there, getting near the end of the week finally.
Getting towards the end of the week, and I believe, is this your first segment for 2023?
I think it is actually. It's always a fun thing whenever you get near New Year's and you say, "Hey, I'll talk to you next year," and then kind of breaks your brain.
And
so
then
I guess
it just
it's like,
pops up.
See, I'm loaded and rolling next year. So here's next year. You know, pop out the leftover champagne if you have any left, and we'll celebrate.
Or Thomas, we're excited to have you on. And one of the things that we're getting to chat about, because we always get to talk about cool tech and trends and things like that. Right now, we're going to dive into 3D printing. I remember this when it first kind of happened years and years ago, how this is going to be revolutionary and just change the world. And then I think, for me at least, it kind of fell off my radar. But is this still a really big part of our everyday life? Is this still something that we're going to see grow in the future?
Yes, big and getting bigger. So I had this cool opportunity to pull my nose up real quick. It is Cobalt Nation with Gil Mayron. And basically what he was he was like one of the folks who had revolutionized it way back in the day, founder of like BotMill 3D, basically fully consumer grade 3D printer. So what's fascinating to see was just how much it's changed and how much when we talk about the supply chain and stuff, what goes into the background of like even making things, fabricating it, making molds. A fun thing is we also learned that the type of plastic that can be used in your 3D printers. Do you know that most, so you like your kitchen utensils and stuff, it's made from a type of plastic that is from like broken down corn. And I thought that like, a lot of plastic you think is petroleum based. But it turns out the really crappy plastic that's good enough for like cafeteria cutlery is made of this low quality corn-based one. And so it turns out when you're trying to make things and even 3D print it, things that are just as important as what the heck are you going to use to make it in the first place to ensure that it doesn't break.
Super interesting, Thomas, and good to see you this year again. It's really interesting that we're finding kind of, again, these redundancies for manufacturing and finding different ways to manufacture these things that we use every day. Is there an opportunity for 3D printing to really fit into that kind of greener space and go through almost like a recycling process? Maybe you've got some plastics that you had that were used. Can those be broken down, turned into filament for 3D printing, and look at maybe starting to add to the recycling supply chain that way?
I think you definitely can. We do see that being used in companies like Shaw and Mohawk. They actually do, different types of pet products, PET, not your animals, my friends, but pet as in plastics that are recycled. I remember when I ran loads with Mohawk, they do that out of the facilities in Virginia. They take the products and clean it, melt it down, and then they'd ship it over to their facilities in like Somerville. And what they would do is they actually turn it into the threads, and they even made like industrial grade things, AstroTurfs, various things you can use out of this recycled plastic. Now it's more expensive than just, getting it fresh from like pellets and stuff. But at the same time, it is really useful, and it's a selling tool for them. When we're talking about 3D printing, I haven't really seen that yet, just because the economies of scale in order to do that probably more of a pain in the neck. When I spoke with Gil, he was talking about how they wanted to make sure that the filaments and the stuff they're using are much higher quality, because people will cut corners. And when you're doing things like making molds and designing like robot arms, I actually had one that made parts for the robots that used an assembly line. So that was another cool thing that we were talking about, was how 3D printing is really cool, but it takes a while. So at the same time, you kind of mix and match your processes to where you can also use robotics and other types of automation to augment and make it a little better. While it's like heating up something in a microwave. You could be like cutting vegetables while it takes 5 minutes to heat up your dish inside the microwave.
And Thomas, of course, there's been a lot of advancements in 3D printing, as you mentioned earlier. Are we seeing that continue forward with just the speed of 3D printing? I know when we're looking at consumer-grade 3D printers, it's like you upload something into your 3D printer, then you kind of go to sleep and you wake up the next morning, and then voila, it's like an easy bake oven almost. Are we seeing that also start to get a little bit more advancement as well in the speed of the 3D printing itself?
Well, we are seeing advancements in that some of the early like copyrights and trademarks and stuff are finally going away. So some of the processes that were pioneered like 10 years ago or so, we're getting more people adopting them as it's becoming like publicly available. It's not like domain, I don't think like a Disney where you got to wait like 75 years. But that was one part of the conversation that was interesting, was that he had noticed that the early pioneers, a lot of folks are coming in now, and some of the processes that have been developed in the past, other folks are trying to use on and improve upon. So it was really cool. It was a deep dive. I didn't find out if I could 3D print a truck yet, because there's a lot of different parts. It takes a lot of work. 3D printing is really good at like repeatedly making things, but what we're seeing on the next level and the new domain is customization. So let's say that you had like 1,000 different types of containers, but you wanted to customize them. Well, 3D printers are also coming in as a great way on the back end to customize items, and you'll get a little bit more customization and less waste. So instead of having like 10 widgets on a shelf, with 3D printing, you really do have just the materials on hand. So that was the change in supply chain that I thought was fascinating, was, instead of having all this bulk amount of warehousing and storing items like we had this problem 2 years, 3D printing really allows us to just store the raw materials and then, make on demand. So that's going to be a really cool thing to think about in the next 10 and 20 years, is because we're getting into this point where supply chains may fundamentally alter to the point where tractor trailers are hauling more raw materials to various points. But then the distribution hubs and networks are much more localized because, you don't have to go from the vendor, manufacturer to the vendor to the inbound facility, distribution hub, distribution to outbound. You remove a lot of that complexity in truckload movement by just having, inbound pellets of plastic, go to 3D printer, 3D printing, make it, and then you have like last mile or short haul.
There you go, remove some of those steps. Thomas, let's pivot really quickly to your 2023 outlook for contract rates and touch a little bit about what went on in your newsletter this week.
Definitely. So it's all about the spread, and it's not something you put on your toast, but the spread between spot and contract. We were at like 83 cents yesterday. The folks at another competing firm had said 69 cents for December. He who must not be named, the old joke of Voldemort of freight. But anyways, I digress. The situation right now is that we do know that spot rates are a leading indicator of contract, kind of like the Iditarod, the dog's pulling the sleigh. If you think of the sleigh as the 70% of the contract market and the dogs being the 30% on the spot, depending upon your mix. But anyways, the TLDR with this is that expectations are, of course, going to be that contract rates are going down. Now, to the extent of how far they go down, some folks like Wolf Research had noted in conversations with private carriers that, they originally thought they'd lose 5%. Now we're looking at like maybe upwards of 10% in terms of contract rate decreases. But at the same time, for brokers, a large shipper in retail had noted that they were able to get 25 to 30% discounts on contracted lanes from freight brokerages. Another trucking company had noted that high volume lanes were seeing double digits compared to lower volume ones. So what does that mean for the casual observer? Well, we have a lot more room currently to see contract rates fall, which is not good for large publicly traded carriers who base a lot of their revenues off of that. One company thought they're going to lose like 3 to 4% on their margins because of this kind of thing. So it's super important to pay attention to. The big question, though, and I don't have a crystal ball for this, is when we look at that spread and we say, well, I'm at 83 cents. And if contract rates go down another 10%, well, then I've only went down by, 8 more cents. So, if we're going to see parity, that's the big question I'm curious to watch and see because there's a lot of competing theories. Is there a pricing floor? Has inflation made it to where maybe a 30% difference is the new normal? We don't expect it to get better until at least the middle of 2023 is also what a lot of consensus is.
And Thomas, for those that just want to hear more of your content because it is entertaining and informative, where can they find you?
You can check me out, tv.freightwaves.com. Haven't had my coffee this morning, so the wheels are not moving as fast as they normally do. But also loaded and rolling, it's a newsletter. I think we're switching over to Tuesdays and Thursdays at a more reasonable hour in the afternoon. So unfortunately for those night owls who like my Wednesday night newsletters, pop in the inbox. Probably by next week, we'll have something a little bit more, responsible. But yeah, definitely check it out. I'm also on Sirius on Tuesdays with Grace. Sometimes I fill in and got to go on Mark Willis's Sirius XM radio show yesterday, spreading the gospel of sonar. So we were preaching from the trucking mount, so to speak.
There you go. All right, Thomas, thank you for that. And as I mentioned, catch him on tv.freightwaves.com. We're going to toss things back over to the wall. We've got our next carrier update.
Welcome into this carrier update. Donnie, we've talked about van rejections and reefer rejections. Now we're gonna look at the whole picture that we track. And I mean, obviously seeing rejection rates in aggregate move lower, really being driven by flatbed coming off their recent highs.
Yeah, so right now in the blue line here, this is OTRI, which is everything, and it's coming down. It's now down to 5.28. We saw the peak. We didn't even get to 6%.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah.
But like I say, there's two things that are really fighting these rejection rates from rising. One is lower volumes, and two is that really high diesel fuel price. And that's, like I say, if spot rates jumped up 60 cents overnight, this still probably may not change.
Yeah.
Because they're getting over 70 cents per rate per mile right now for their fuel surcharges. And spot rates and contract rates are very close together. So that's going to keep these rejection rates down. And that's why over the last couple of days, I've been pushing to look at tender lead times because that might be a better indicator right now. But we see this drop back down. Now, if we swap over to your side over there, you can see here in the green line, these are flatbed rejection rates. They're still at 17.68%. And we're going to bring that up here here shortly, and we'll look at the seasonality, because you looked at the seasonality of reefer and dry van. Reefer's at 7.11% and 5.08% is our dry van. Not much reaction over the holiday season.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't see much, especially in this scale, just because of how high reefer or flatbed rejections are, right? So it pushes the scale. So van rejections are moving lower. Reefer, they're more or less holding steady, which is why I've said, I mean, if you look at it, they match almost perfectly.
How much lower can these fall during the first and second months of this year? Let's go to the next chart here. I want to dive in a little bit deeper into the flatbed. Now, flatbed, we are right here, Tony. This dark blue line. And these are the 3 previous years. A good indication, a positive indication for flatbedders is expect rates probably to go down here over the next 30 days, but sometime either late January, early February, or mid-February, you see all these start to pick up.
Yeah.
So they have a light at the end of the tunnel right now, let's say. In about 45 days, they could be seeing some better rates, or they need to start pushing their rates up anyways to try to get the momentum to push their rates up.
Yeah, I mean, you start looking at like building permits and the backlog of housing that's still there. You're seeing lumber prices come down, which would likely increase demand, at least on the housing front, right?
Yeah.
Which can help push these rates higher because more demand.
It's a lot cheaper to build a house right now
than it was
6 months ago.
I mean, look at. And this was the last mode to really react to any changes. So it'd be interesting to see how this changes over the next couple months. So thank you, Donnie, for this update. Right now, we'll take a quick break, but we'll be back with more FreightWaves Now.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Let's go. Nobody works for free, so why should we be expecting our drivers to? Okay, let's just get it together now. What are some of those proactive steps that you can start taking now? For myself, I would like the Earth to still be here for a little bit longer, but you know, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, okay. Is pizza an open-faced sandwich? It's bread.
I have been ready for this question. I've seen the show.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for making me hungry. Now I want a hot dog.
You're welcome. Catch episodes of Check Call Tuesdays at 12:30 on FreightWaves TV. Keep up with all things Check Call on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation.
This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Thanks for joining us back again at FreightWaves Now. And today is National Screenwriters Day, and why not talk about a show that Netflix just put out that is probably a headache to screenwriters. It's a show that you can watch any episode in any order. I'll let somebody else explain from TikTok.
So I just finished Netflix's newest banger, Kaleidoscope. And this is by far one of the most fun, unique, and creative shows that has hit any streaming service. The reason being, depending on what order you watch the episodes, your experience entirely changes. Allow me to explain. The story centers around this big heist that our characters are going to partake in, and basically each episode takes place at a specific point in time before or after the heist. The colors you see here are the different episode names, but the one major thing is you have to watch the episode named white last always, no matter what. And the crazy thing is as well, Netflix randomizes the order for you, so whatever order you get, it's completely different from the next account. And what's crazy, I didn't know that, so the unique order they gave me, I literally just watched backwards, so I had an even more unique experience. So my order ended up being pink, red, blue, orange, violet, yellow, green. And then obviously white at the end, so let's talk about it. This was a very entertaining heist show with some fun and really good performances. And Giancarlo Esposito, who is a legend. In my experience while watching it, I basically watched the story go from backwards to the beginning. I basically watched the future events transpire, and through me continuously watching, I got the context later. I learned all the characters' motives, I saw how they interacted with each other and their relationships, and I saw what they became in the future, and essentially what they used to be as well.
Now, I'm really excited to watch this show, and I haven't started yet, and I have a few friends that we're going to try an experiment where we watch in different order and talk about how our interactions to the show went. Netflix also posted this on their Facebook yesterday, different ways you can watch Kaleidoscope. And again, it's just so interesting that you can just pick up anywhere you want to, but always remember white needs to go towards the end. Probably gonna watch it like an old detective movie, I think was one of those suggestions. But anyways, that's a look at what's trending on social media. We're gonna take a look at the last 24 hours of freight with our market recap.
Here at FreightWaves, and rumor has it it's going to be a good one.
That's right. It's going to be the Sales and Marketing Summit, and I'm excited for this one, and I think I get to co-host with you.
I think you do as well. We're back at it again, partners in crime. Head on over to live.freightwaves.com and get registered for the Sales and Marketing Summit if you haven't yet. This is just one of our very many free virtual events that you can choose to attend this year. And look at that. We've got a schedule of what's coming up next as well. If you miss Sales and Marketing next week, well, sorry, you're out of luck. But don't worry, you won't have to wait too long because Global Supply Chain Week will be coming up in just about a month after that.
That's right, one of my favorites. And of course, we have 2 in-person events this year, one in Cleveland and one right back here in Freight Alley, Chattanooga, Tennessee. So be sure you attend some of these virtual events so you can get your networking kind of lined up and get ready for those in-person events.
Absolutely. Head on over to live.freightwaves.com to get registered for all of those and more. You can do it during this break. We'll be right back in just a few minutes to kick off our second hour of FreightWaves Now.
guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
Good day coming.
Welcome back for our second hour of FreightWaves Now here on your Thursday morning. Starting off with some top stories up on FreightWaves.com this morning. Asset-light trucking provider Forward Air has announced it will acquire expedited LTL carrier Land Air Express for $56.5 million. The deal will add 270 employees and over 200 drivers to the Forward Air network and bump its terminal count up by 25. FMCSA data lists the company with 302 power units currently. This will expand the Forward Air airport-to-airport LTL network. Will also add 4 new markets. Forward Air expects the deal to contribute between $74 and $94 million in revenue annually. Analyst reaction to the news of C.H. Robinson CEO Bob Biesterfeld leaving the company has been fairly harsh, with UBS analysts slapping a sell recommendation on company shares with an $81 per share price target. Shares closed at $90.80 yesterday. Analysts at Bank of America Merrill Lynch downgraded their outlook to neutral and dropped 12-month price targets by almost $10. All analysts agree that the macroeconomic weakness affecting the brokerage was out of Biesterfeld's control, however, as was the decline of contract rates, which accounts for 60% of C.H. Robinson's brokerage business. Microsoft is reportedly planning to invest in middle-mile autonomous trucking company Gatik as the group rolls out more revenue-generating routes in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Canada. The software company would invest $10 million in financing round that would value Gatik at $700 million, but neither group has confirmed the participation yet. Microsoft has invested in the autonomous space before, putting money into General Motors-owned Cruise in 2021. The FMCSA is proposing more oversight of truck brokers and freight forwarders along with the bond companies that back them up in an effort to reduce the amount of money they can put on motor carriers. The proposal states that while most brokers operate with integrity, there is a minority with shady business practices that create unnecessary financial hardships for some motor carriers. This complaint has been brought to FMCSA multiple times by the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, and they have been working on this proposal since 2018. And several online grocery firms have merged to form a new e-commerce solution to compete with grocery giants like Walmart, Instacart, Kroger, and Amazon. The group, called Store.ai, was formed by the collaboration between RelationShop and Store.ai, worth over $50 million. Store.ai was already working with over 100 clients in the United States, mostly regional grocers like Netcost and Kayarta supermarkets. The company has over 200 customers now in 8 different countries. And you can find details of these stories and more on FreightWaves.com and our FreightWaves app. And if you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, give us a like and subscribe. For the full FreightWaves TV experience, move on over to tv.freightwaves.com. And we're going to move on over to the wall for our next carrier update.
Welcome into this carrier update, Donnie. I know this is one of the charts you like looking at it because you like looking at contract rates both on the reefer side and the van side, and we've got both of them pulled up here with that overall rejection
Well, I
rate.
went and changed this time, and I brought it up with rejection rates, but this is what spot rates did exactly as well. So I kind of get a false feeling here when I look at this, and that's contracted rates going up. Yeah, they are going up. They'll come right back down. They'll follow this pattern. But if you lock in higher contracted rates right now, in 30 days, where they're going to be at, and where are you going to be in the waterfall process for that shipper?
Yep.
If you get a really good contracted rate, you might be number 8 in line, and those that load may never get past 1, 2, or 3. I'd want to be number 1 or number 2, if depending on how many trucks I have. Of course, if I had 25 trucks, maybe 3 or 4. But if you're too far down that waterfall process, Tony, you're not going to get any loads to be able to accept or reject.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, you'd look at it. So our contract rate data is 14 days lag. So, I mean, you're talking right around the start of when we saw rejection rates start to move up, spot rates start to move up. Well, guess what? Contract rates are following, and it's all holiday related, right? Like this upward movement we're seeing, especially on the van side, is going to be that holiday related move. Because I mean, if you look overall, you see it. I mean, you see it in Thanksgiving, right? Same concept. It's just a matter of it catching up to.
And we know it's going to be down here in 2 months. So, you know, this is why right now, if you lock in contracted rates, you need to work very close with your main shippers. And the reason is because if you start losing volume, you may need to go back and just adjust, but you need to talk to them. It's a contract. You can fix contracts. It's not pretty all the time, but you need to go back and say, hey, look, we're giving a discount or whatever else. Please continue to give us our freight. If there's an issue, please call me.
Yeah, whereas this is where, if you're locking in the rates, you want those rejection rates to be not. You don't want to be turning around that freight, because if it falls to another service provider and they service it and it's a cheaper rate, well, the likelihood of the volume coming back to you is going to be, once you lose it, it's hard to get it back.
Yeah, and that losing it could be simply to the spot market. Because rates are a lot cheaper, and shippers are going to try to start taking advantage of these discounts. They're not worried about Christmas anymore. Past Christmas, their goods have been moved. Now they're like, hey, if this is the time to do it, which is January and February, this is where they're going to start pulling that freight, take advantage of the discounts on the spot market, and try to move them there. And you have to keep that freight. And how? Because you need to service it. You need to provide excellent customer service. Call your customers in the morning before they call you for their updates. Simple as that.
Absolutely. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Great, thanks guys for that. We're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got our investigative reporter Clarissa Hawes joining us today for an update on United Furniture Inc., the situation going on with their bankruptcy. Clarissa, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on today.
So let's dig right into it. United Furniture Inc. released the news that they were shuttering operations right before Thanksgiving, impacted a handful of employees with not a whole lot of notice. And now we've got a little bit more information on what's going on with the financial side of things. Can you give us an overview of the situation?
Sure. And, you know, this happened like 2 days before Christmas, where United Furniture employees received a note, like more than 2,700 is what they're saying, found out via email or text that they no longer had jobs, and that their insurance coverage and COBRA was being, benefits were going to be canceled immediately. And so, and everybody expected the company that would be filing for bankruptcy protection over the next few days or even the next week, and that didn't happen. So like Wells Fargo Bank, which is their senior secured lender, we're finding more details about what happened that day that led up to this abrupt closure. And it was that, as the secured lender, Wells Fargo had an agreement with them, a security and credit agreement, and they had amended it, to allow for more funds 4 times over a year and a half. And that on the day of the closure, they had, without notice, had, called and said, hey, we need more funds to keep operating. And without any, reason or providing any, documentation about how it would be repaid or anything. And Wells Fargo at the time said, no, we can't accommodate that on such, and we have to get approval by our credit, board to do this. And so they just came back and said, well, that's the end, then we're shutting down. So, there was like a 377 page filing, that went along with the involuntary petition to force them into bankruptcy.
And Clarissa, any details on how much is owed or what the total sums look like right now?
I only have the totals from Wells Fargo Bank, as since they were the one really that is forcing this filing, and they're owed about $99 million in this. And so, in order, as they waited it out, they did want, United Furniture employees to be able to get, and customers to get their freight. But, there were on that day that they closed, it was, they left no, they didn't have a security team to or insurance, for cargo insurance or anything. And so Wells Fargo kind of stepped in to maintain these facilities. But a lot of, from what I'm hearing from a source familiar with the situation, is that a lot of the backhaul information was not included. Those records, they did, since all the employees were gone, that, kind of knew where everything was and in the computer systems and everything, they had no idea, what was legitimate claims, what weren't. And so it became a very time-consuming process. They knew of the main customers with the, moving furniture deliveries, but not the backhauls. So that became one of the reasons why it got so overwhelming that they had to do this, and from their side.
So, Clarissa, in a situation like this, where a business that is that large, to have over 2,700 employees, just suddenly shutters their doors, is now being forced into bankruptcy by their chief lending agency, is there any cause or any path for employees who are affected by this to maybe now sue the company itself, or because they move into bankruptcy, doesn't that not happen?
Well, they're, in a bankruptcy situation now, everything will be moved. If the judge approves it, allows it to go forward, they'll all be moved into a non-priority class, where all of these secured creditors will, if any money is collected from this, will go to them first. And usually the employees and drivers are some of the last to be paid in these types of bankruptcies.
And Clarissa, with this bankruptcy, do you see this as a sign of some of the macroeconomic times right now, or is this really kind of just a one-off situation?
With this company, it's kind of unusual that a company doesn't, proactively do this step, take this step to file. But I think we're going to see more smaller fleets be forced to file, either to reorganize or to liquidate in 23.
And then with that, Wells Fargo, the one taking the step to force them to file, what does their legal action look like for next steps? Now, does it go to proceedings and then has to go through a judge and then we see the payout, or is there something else that could really force UFI's hand into now paying them out?
it's when a trustee, if the judge, allows it to move forward, and they are urging an interim trustee to come in and immediately try to help with the liquidation process, it could move faster, but if the company executives aren't willing to, kind of cooperate and provide documentation or allow access to the, to the records and everything, it can be a more tedious process. And sometimes it takes years before this is all sorted out. And usually there's a limited amount of funds left over to pay the employees.
And Clarissa, of course, the employees are going to be one of the big things at the forefront of all of this. As you look towards the rest of the week and really the rest of the month here, are there any other stories that you're looking to work on, or any sneak peeks to anything that you haven't released just yet?
Sure. I'm working on a story involving Spangle the Clown, who has filed a lawsuit against a trucking company in and it's called La Trucking, where his common law partner was killed in a semi crash near Springfield, Missouri. But Missouri is, there's only a few states that actually recognize common law marriages, and Missouri isn't one of them. So and her daughter, so the victim in this case, the deceased daughter, has filed a motion to intervene in this case as she is considered the heir of the estate. And that Sparkle the Clown, which is his legal name, is not. So I'm filing that later today. I've been trying to get a little more clear information on that case, but it's an interesting one, and one I haven't really covered for a while. So
definitely looking forward to that. And Clarissa, thank you so much for joining us this morning, always bringing us breaking news and interesting cases. We look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks for having me.
Right now we're going to toss it back over to Kaylee Nix with our next weather update.
Thanks, Anthony, for that. And we're talking about more winter weather across the Northeast. And this one's not super impactful, just enough to be a little bit annoying. But we could be seeing some travel issues, just some light travel issues all the way up from Maine and down along the Maine coast. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. Got some light snowfall going on across the northern parts of Maine up into New Brunswick. And with that, we do have some decently heavy snow moving through the Bangor area and right along kind of that coastline into Portland. Because of that, we do have winter weather advisories in place. That I-95 corridor stretching down from Portland into Boston. Could be seeing once again some snowfall amounts, maybe possibly some freezing rain in there too. But as I mentioned, not a whole lot to be dangerous, just enough to be kind of annoying for travel out there. Same thing across upstate New York and into Vermont, just kind of a smattering of different types of mixed precipitation here right now. Do have some sleet going on, possibly some snowflakes falling. But what we're going to watch is this area of moisture that's moving through the Great Lakes area right now continue to move up pretty quickly to the north-northeast, possibly bringing once again some snowfall showers to that edge of Lake Erie. Could see once again possibly some lake effect snow from these areas, but as it gets colder, those Great Lakes are beginning to freeze over, get more ice cover, which means less of a chance for that lake effect snow. Good news for those folks out in Buffalo is they're still digging out from that extreme snowfall event that we saw 2 weeks ago over the Christmas holiday. Still seeing impacts there to travel as well. As far as that existing storm and areas of snowfall around the Midwest right now, we do have some pretty heavy snow going on across central Wisconsin into the Chicago area. Again, winter weather advisories in place. Main area of issue is going to be travel along I-55 from Bloomington up into the Chicago metro, as well as up to the north-northwest. So out there, just take it slow. Be prepared for possibly some areas of low visibility as well as some slick roadways out there. That snow should rotate through pretty quickly this afternoon and this evening and get out of here by the time that we hit your Friday morning traffic rush hour. We'll talk about weather one more time before we're done here for the day. Right now, we're going to toss it to a quick break. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation, inflation, inflation.
This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome into this week's edition of On the Spot. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined this week by none other than Donnie Gilbert. Donnie, how are you doing?
We're doing good, sir. We're looking at these numbers and they make me nervous.
Yeah.
I'll let you break them down. But this leads into a lot of what I talk about on the carrier update and why. So, Tony, fire away. Let's jump right in.
Yeah, so obviously, Logistics Managers Index came out earlier this week. It kind of breaks down all sorts or all across what logistics managers are dealing with. And the way to look at the LMI, like many other survey results, anything above 50 is expansionary, anything below 50, contraction. So we'll look at it kind of what we find, or the whole thing is important to look at, but break down some of the more important sub-indices inside of that.
Do a quick one sentence. What is the LMI? Describe it.
So it's just a survey of logistics managers across the country, their view on what's happening with transportation capacity, utilization, prices, warehousing, all of the different aspects that they touch on a daily basis, whether that's growing or contracting.
Their boots on the ground.
Yep, exactly. So first one we've got here we'll look at is transportation prices. We just talked about it in a carrier update, looking at contract rates, but this is a good example right now. So new number, it hasn't updated in Sonar, but the December number, we saw transportation falling at a faster rate, so down to 36.9. So continuing in that contraction phase. So showing transportation prices are falling, and we see it. I mean, we've seen the trend overall, but we're seeing it on the contract side. We've seen spot rates. Obviously, they had a little bump because of the holiday, but they've come down or going to start coming down because those peaks are going to start falling off the 7-day average.
They fell quickly after the holiday. They went from nearly $3 a mile down. Today's $2.73. So here they've fallen almost 30 cents in just a few days.
Yeah. So we look at this, it's not really a surprise. I mean, it's more of a when do we find the bottom? So seeing this accelerate, that downward movement is the concerning part because it tells us we're not at the bottom. And I think you and I both agree, contract rates have a ways to go here in Q1 and even into Q2. I mean, we're going to see rate reductions just given how loose the market is overall, how far demand has come down from its peaks last year when really rates were still rising and holding up pretty strong. And then we saw demand fall away and it's continued to decline. And now it's just a matter of time before rates, especially contract rates, catch up.
There's nothing in Sonar that we're seeing that shows us an end in sight, Tony. So the gloom is there for first quarter. It's going to probably lead well into second quarter as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll move here to our next chart. And it's inventory levels. And it's one we've talked about a lot. It's one in Sonar, we don't necessarily, this is probably our best gauge of inventories. But I mean, you hear it from retailers and the like. They're doing things to improve inventory levels, but it really hasn't happened. So we see here, it was at 54.8 in November. It was at 57.3 in December. So you saw an increase, right? So it kind of broke this trend, stayed above 50, and it's starting to accelerate. So inventory levels grew again in December, which is a concern when you think about what's happening on the consumer front. You're seeing a slowdown in the consumer. Inventory levels are building. You're getting warehouse capacity warehouse capacity is contracting. So there's less available capacity in these warehouses. Utilization is up and growing. So, I mean, it's just this combination of things. There's no more space to put goods, and inventory levels are still growing.
Yeah, I would like for you to dig deeper into this, and this is what I like to see. Do they order less, but we as consumers are buying a lot less, and that pushed inventories up? Or are they still over ordering? This is very concerning. This is what is really going to hurt this economy are these growing inventory levels when we do not need the inventory. That's why our imports have dropped so bad, because there's plenty of goods that are here and they're in warehouses. The only thing this is good for is if you rent warehouse space.
Yeah, and I think one of my concerns is and we'll see it a little later, is what do retail sales and credit card spending look like in December? When we get those numbers, we'll obviously talk about it, but it's a concern when you see this number still growing and you've seen spending, especially on goods, really start to slow down, right? Services spending still strong. I mean, you look at retail sales, it's not adjusted for inflation. They were negative in November. Obviously, part of that was against difficult comps from October. But does that trend continue? Do we see retail sales continue to slow down, especially as you get here into the first quarter? Really, that there's not a lot driving what a consumer would want to spend on, right? There's no holiday to back it up.
We knew a long time ago we were going to have a few rough months during November, December, on the simple reason of higher inflation, high fuel costs. You know, I kid around, but you know, it's really not funny. We get paid on Friday, you go fill your car up, you go to the grocery store, you don't have any more money. Yeah. And we knew that would really be hard for a lot of people to buy Christmas gifts this year. So that could simply be, maybe they did cut their spending back or their ordering back. And again, people just weren't able to buy as much because they didn't have anything in the bank, or maybe their credit cards were already maxed out.
Yeah, and you've heard retailers say that they were cutting orders. It's just a matter of getting it. And we'll look at one quick chart, final chart, transportation capacity. Obviously, 71.4. It actually went down slightly to 69.5, but it's above 50, so it's still growing. That's why we're seeing rejection rates down at 5%, right? So, I mean, we pulled this back over 5 years. You can kind of see how the ebbs and flows of how rejections and the LMI work almost in opposite, right? When capacity's growing at a rapid pace, rejection rates are really low. Once that rejection rates tighten up and people leave the market, rejection rates soar. We see contraction.
And this is why we're not going to see, as I spoke about, the tender lead times. With the 71 capacity growing, this is not going to put shippers under any pressure. They're not having issues getting capacity. And until they do, spot rates are going to continue to drop. Contract rates are going to continue to drop. They're living the high life right now. Of course, they've had a rough 2 years.
Absolutely. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for joining me on this week's On the Spot. Right now, we'll take a quick break, but we'll be back right after this.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Wasson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June. Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for a final check of weather for the day, moving back to California. So we talk about the atmospheric river event that's going on there, bringing incredibly heavy soaking rainfall, strong winds, mudslides, flooding, basically you name it, it'll happen in California here these next few days. And let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. This is the estimated precipitation to expect throughout the next 2 days. As you can tell, this is really where all that moisture is coming from. So we call it an atmospheric river because we set up with a ton of moisture coming onshore from over the center of the Pacific. All of this moisture here spreading to a bullseye directly above the San Francisco area. So between Eureka and San Francisco, we're looking at really heavy, substantial rainfall here. Most places are going to see between 3.5 to 4 inches of rain throughout the next few days. Isolated spots could see upwards of 5 to 6 inches of rain. So that's something that we definitely can't rule out there. And with this heavy rainfall, of course, California notoriously in its drought, that means that the ground is pretty dry. Doesn't give a chance for that rain to actually saturate and soak into the ground because of how dry that is, which means that it just runs off and creates a ton of runoff. So because of that, we do have flash flood warnings in effect for basically everywhere along the coastline. Flood watches for areas just a little bit more inland. It's going to be pretty dangerous as far as mudslides go and landslides go. So US 101 along the coast could be watching for some pretty dangerous driving conditions there. As some of that heavy rainfall kind of washes away that coastal highway, could be looking at road closures, delays, if not just pieces of the highway completely washed out. Alongside that, we've also got high wind warnings in place for those upper elevations. As that moisture comes inshore, the winds blow upslope, getting very strong. Sustained winds at about 25 miles an hour, wind gusts between 35 and 45, possibly higher in some places. So again, talking down trees, down power lines, basically just a very dangerous situation out there. Of course, this has been going on now for about 2 days across the San Francisco area, but is expected to continue through tonight and into the start of your Friday. So just be careful if you are out there at all and take those precautions. We'll continue to watch this as we move throughout the rest of the week on FreightWaves Now. Right now, we're going to toss things over to Bill Priestley for our roundtable.
2022 seemed to be the year of labor, of course, with the rail issues and the ILWU still not having the solution to their issues out in California and on the West Coast. And now Air Cargo has, not necessarily that they were unscathed in 2022, but now another issue popping up here. And joining us to talk about it is Eric Kulisch, our Air Cargo editor. And Eric, we've got something going on here at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, and this could be brewing to something pretty big pretty soon, right?
In Chicago, O'Hare Airport is one of the, top international cargo gateways for air transport. It's a major hub, and, so a lot of logistics companies in the area, a lot of shippers that go through there. And right now we've got a labor situation that's kind of self-created by the city of Chicago and the airport authority there that has, this summer imposed these license requirements or for ground handling contractors. Those are the companies that the airlines basically outsource their cargo handling to load and unload their planes and pass the shipments on to the freight forwarders. These ground handling agents have terminals at the airport, and the city is a requirement to maintain their licenses, said they had to sign these so-called labor peace agreements, which basically says that if a union approaches you and wants to start organizing or wants to interact with your workers, you have to make it easier for them, or you need to sign an agreement with that union on the process for them to try and organize those workers. So, the companies have reluctantly signed that, but now one of the biggest unions, the Service Employees International, has approached the companies and wants that to implement that deal. And some of the companies are balking over some of the terms, including card check requirements. So basically, the city's threatened to revoke their licenses by January 20th, so in a couple weeks. and that could basically delay or shut down or impact close to 2/3 of the cargo that goes through O'Hare. So it could have significant ripple effects.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into this a little bit. You kind of gave a little bit of the backstory there. How long has this been brewing, and when did we really figure out, oh gosh, now we've got 2 weeks and we could possibly have a labor issue?
Yeah, I think it's slowly been brewing for many years. Airport workers from, baggage handlers to concession workers and others have been complaining about wages and other conditions for a long time. And now you're starting to see some of this, apply to the cargo handling side as well. And so there have been efforts to increase minimum wage and increase other benefits. But in this case, last year, early in the year, the city council passed a rule or a resolution implementing these new license requirements for the contractors. And so it was implemented in August, and those deals were signed. And then the union approached the contractors in October saying, we want a labor peace agreement. And so the city's not really advertised this. FreightWaves was the first to report on it, and the city notified a bunch of airlines, let's say 24 airlines, that this impasse was afoot, and that you might want to look for alternative contingencies, but really it's just kind of popped up right before Christmas and caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, talking about some of these licenses, can you go into perhaps a little bit of the legal basis? Do these licenses and requirements have legal basis in Illinois?
Well, some of these labor peace agreements are apparently, they're becoming more prevalent at airports. You see them with certain hotels and other areas. And on the surface, you would think that, labor relations in this country are guided mostly by the National Labor Relations Act, and for airlines and railroads by the Railroad Labor Act. And those are federal laws, and usually they preempt state and local laws and regulations. But the Supreme Court kind of carved out this small exception, basically saying if a municipality or a local government had some proprietary interest in a facility, then they could, be just like any other market player and kind of regulate or put conditions on the parties it deals with. So in this case, the city or the airport authority gains a lot of revenue, runs the airport, gives out licenses, collects fees, and so forth. So technically, the argument is they have a proprietary interest and can impose these conditions. And, the unions are there's a strong union element in Chicago. And so, this is a way for unions to break into that airport sector and try and gain membership in an area that, with years of union declines, these labor peace agreements can kind of help them get into companies.
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting how you define proprietary interest there as well. One of the things about this that you noted in your story, mediation arbitration clauses were taken out. And so whereas what we saw in rail, where there was like a cooling off period or a negotiating period or someone who would bring in arbitration, that doesn't exist here, it looks like. What's the situation there, and why were these clauses taken out?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I think, the union probably lobbied Mayor Lightfoot was for this change in the rules as well. And, in the past, I think there was some labor peace agreement component to these licenses, but it did have a mediation and arbitration and other steps. And so now that has been removed, and it's basically you will sign a labor peace agreement within 60 days of a union approaching you and saying they want to organize or communicate with the workers. So that's how we got to this position.
Okay, so let's take it to unfortunately worst case scenario. What happens here if we get a work stoppage?
Yeah, so we're they're not sure. Hopefully, the sides will work something out and we won't have an end or a shutdown here. But
absolutely,
some of the airlines have said that there's no way that, it's not like a restaurant business or something. If you shut down a couple restaurants in Terminal 3, you could bring in another restaurant relatively quickly. Air cargo handling companies are few and far between. They're very technically oriented. You need special training, equipment, security clearances. You can't pop them up overnight, and there aren't that many of them. So, even if you could shift some of the cargo to other cargo handling agents, they're already swamped with cargo and have labor shortages, so that'll cause problems. Some airlines have said they'll have to suspend operations at Chicago O'Hare for an indefinite period. They might try and go to alternative airports, but that could take a while to set up arrangements with other ground handlers there. Takes maybe 3 months to get all those processes in place. They might fly to some airports where they already have arrangements, but it's going to be very tricky. And some of these airlines are asking for the city to give a several months extension on this deadline to help work things out so they can make other arrangements, because they can't do it in a few weeks.
Yeah, that's definitely true there. What's obviously with no mediation, arbitration, kind of safety net cooling off period, what's the protocol moving forward? Is it just get to a desk, hammer it out, and do it as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I don't know. The city has not refused to have any sit down for an interview with us, but we're hoping that either the union and the companies or the city can come together and try and resolve this, or the city can provide some relief or help. Some of the airlines are hoping the city can step in and help find other cargo handling agents, or one of the fears is that the remaining cargo handling agents that get all this overflow business will have command the market. Rates will shoot up, and so they're hoping the city will help them find other places to move their cargo through, but also to make sure there's no price gouging.
Yeah, is this also just the city's responsibility, or do perhaps airlines have the ability to say, hey, we've worked with other companies at other airports, maybe they could come in on our behalf and move our cargo?
Yeah, I'm sure all those things are being tried. The airlines are likely complaining or putting pressure on the airport authority and the city to try and come to some kind of compromise, or not to draw a line in the sand over these licenses. But they also may have, cargo handlers that they use in other airports that they could try and encourage to approach the city about getting a license or getting, access to the airport and setting up shop there. So I think all those things are potentially, happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, so you mentioned this is a very, very specific situation with Chicago, given the legislation that the city council there has passed, though. But looking at that, is this a situation that has a possibility of spreading perhaps to other airports? We've seen labor issues, say, for instance, with Amazon, where they have seen unions pop up in New York State. That seemed to spread a little bit. And generally speaking, when one group kind of, starts to maneuver in one direction with labor, generally others follow. Do you see this staying in Chicago, or could this possibly spread to other areas?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bill. And it's funny you mentioned Amazon. Amazon's one of the companies that's potentially impacted here because one of their ground handlers in Chicago O'Hare, falls into this situation. And also, I recently reported that the cargo handlers at Amazon's Air Hub in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky Airport are right. Trying to get organized or meet with a union there. But to answer your broader question, yeah, that is the fear. I mean, this potentially has implications at other airports. There have been some labor peace agreements at San Francisco Airport, LAX, in Los Angeles, maybe Baltimore. Those have mostly been on the passenger side or inside the passenger terminals with baggage handlers or restaurants or what have you, janitorial services. So, but this is there's more impetus by unions to use this tool, and we could potentially see more airports being asked to apply these labor peace agreements on the cargo handling side for sure.
It's going to be an interesting. 2022 was the year of labor. 2023 may say hold my beer, watch this. We'll see what happens. Eric Kulisch, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll keep tabs on this as January 20th comes closer.
Good talking to you, Bill. Thanks.
All right, thank you. We will take a short break. Be back right after this.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation, inflation, inflation.
This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
And welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for one final check of your top stories this morning. The FMCSA is proposing more oversight of truck brokers and freight forwarders, along with the entities that support them on the back end, because they say that they want to reduce the amount of money that those brokers can put on motor carriers. The proposal states that while most brokers operate with integrity, there is a minority with shady business practices that create unnecessary financial hardship for some motor carriers. The complaint has been brought to the FMCSA multiple times by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. They have been working on this proposal since 2018. Several online grocery firms have merged to form a new e-commerce solution to compete with grocery giants like Walmart, Instacart, Kroger, and Amazon. The group called Store.ai was formed by the collaboration between RelationShop and Store.ai, which was worth over $50 million. Store.ai was already working with over 100 clients in the U.S., mostly regional grocers like Netcost and Vyarta supermarkets. The company has over 200 customers right now in 8 countries. And DoorDash is jumping into the return package pickup service, launching a new offering for reverse logistics. App users can schedule packages to be picked up for return directly to their local carrier. DoorDash is working with UPS, FedEx, and the U.S. Postal Service to build a connective layer of reverse logistics. The service will be a $5 fee for up to 5 packages per pickup, with the option to attach a prepaid shipping label or share a shipping QR code with the courier. And you can find details of those stories and more on FreightWaves.com, as well as our FreightWaves app. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, like and subscribe to stay updated. Head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for the full experience, and go sign up for our live event next week as well. We're going to toss it back over to the wall for a final carrier update.
Welcome into this carrier update, Donnie. Final carrier update means we've got our lanes of the day. You said we're making a loop. We're going to start here out of Atlanta.
We're going on a trip today, Tony, just to look at it and compare and see and have a little fun today. We're going to start in Atlanta. We're going to drive out to Denver. We're going to come back through Chicago and then back to Atlanta and see, is it worth it? You know, because that trip to Denver, but hey, let's look at it. Let's look at some numbers. So we're starting in Atlanta all the way out to Denver, 1,400 miles. Coming out of Atlanta, going to Denver, nobody really wants to go to Denver, but this might be something that you might be interested in because the higher paying rates are where people don't want to go.
Yep.
It's below our NTI. Our NTI is at 273. We're at 257 per mile, but it's also 1,400 miles. So you're getting a pretty good rate heading out there, first of all.
Yep.
So if we take this rate and we go, well, what about getting out of Denver? Well, Denver is
It is the backhaul market.
It is the backhaul of all backhaul markets.
Yep.
Do you want to run backhaul, Tony, all the way from Denver all the way to Chicago at $1.40 a mile?
Probably not.
No. So let's figure out how to get out of Denver first. Next chart here. I don't want to go Denver, but we see Kansas City was, you know, if you look at your tender lead times, your rejection rates, Kansas City has got some color to it. So I don't want to go all the way to Chicago. So I'm going to take this $1.44 a mile. That's a tough one to swallow.
Yeah.
So you better have gotten your money going into Denver. Well, we're going to run it for 600 miles and get from Denver just to Kansas City. There's nothing in between Denver and Kansas City.
Yeah. No.
So we're going to run to Kansas City here, and we're going to eat our losses right here.
Yep.
And from Kansas City, now I'm going to look at, you know, hey, I should be able to get a lot better rate and try to pick a better market to get into because I don't want to go to another backhaul market. So next chart here, we're going to say, hey, I want to get to Chicago. So now we're going to run a little bit less miles, 500 miles, but we're going to get it at 244.
And it's moving up.
And it's moving us into one of the hottest markets in the U.S. for drive-in, which is Chicago. So we're making some better money now. We're back in the black. We're not in the red.
Yep.
And we're landing in a great market. But I need to get back to Atlanta. So once we pack it up here and run, next chart here, Chicago back down to Atlanta, bam, $3.28 a mile. So here, we've looked at it. What kind of day is this? Well, it's 3,200 miles all the way round trip. You're not stopping and unloading a lot like you run these 400 and 500 mile loads. You're not stopping and loading and unloading every day. It's almost 3,300 miles. So you can do this in a week's time if you can time it right. Obviously, you're going to have some perfection on getting unloaded and reloading. I've ran the days that I would schedule this, and hopefully if some of these guys loaded in the afternoons, this is doable. Friday to Friday, I'd start on a Friday and run out to Denver over the weekend, unload on Monday morning, and then keep going. You're looking at $8,100 in total revenue, a little bit more than $8,100. If you ran back and forth on this Chicago lane, the return trip is, I think, around $250. You can average a little bit better, but with this being a 722-mile run, that's in that tweener haul lane. That can really mess you up. You could make about maybe 4 trips of this, so you're going to be only able to get in about, or less than 4 trips, about 22, 23, maybe 2,500 miles. So these are better rates on this lane, but you can't get as many turns in, therefore you're not going to make as much. So it might be a lot better week if you head out to Denver and back.
Absolutely. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for the updates this morning. We'll be sure to check in with you again tomorrow. Right now, hand it over to Kaylee and Anthony to close out the show.
Alrighty, y'all, thank you for that. We're done for your day. Anthony, no Freightonomics. I'm sad.
No Freightonomics. It's going to be on a new time, Tuesdays at 2 o'clock, so you can check us out there. But Kaylee, weather, logistics, and business air, what don't you do?
Yeah, you know what? We do still have plenty of offerings, even though you're missing your Thursday Freightonomics. You can hit Business Air TV coming up noon today. Refuel is here with Scott Bearhang. We've got Taking the High Road. We've got America on 18 Wheels. And People Speaking Rail debuts this afternoon at 3 o'clock. So stay tuned to FreightWaves TV. We've got lots more coming up.
Still tons more coming, as Kaylee mentioned. And be sure to get registered for our virtual event happening next week, the Sales and Marketing Summit. Be there.
Absolutely. Free registration. Head on over to live.freightwaves.com to get registered for that. Have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll see you guys tomorrow for more FreightWaves Now.
FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Welcome into this Descartes Insight. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and joining me to talk about how buying with a user-first mentality can lead to success in freight tech is Jesse Carmichael, Senior Product Manager at Descartes. Jesse, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you, and we are currently experiencing another shift in the tides of the freight market. As a product manager at Descartes, a company with logistics technology adopted across the globe, how should freight tech buyers think about addressing the challenges of a less robust market?
Yeah, I think those buyers need to consider the people that's going to be using that technology. You want to set them up for success. You want to ensure you see that return on the investment that you're making. A lot of things to consider are things such as maintaining service level expectations. You're going to need that to retain and grow market share in down cycles. Also, the tech you're buying, you should have a really good user experience. That user experience is going to enable more productivity.
So you just mentioned user experience. Why does improving your user experience matter so much?
Well, for me, I was a freight broker in a previous life, and I spent a little over a decade there in that industry. It's one of those things where sitting in those seats, experiencing those pain points, I think it's important. I know Descartes thinks it's important to have someone with that background, that experience, to relay that information to our R&D teams, to our UX teams, and really help design a product with a good user experience to facilitate and alleviate some of that pain. The other couple of things you want to think about when you're designing that user experience is you want to make their job easier, right? If their job is easier, they can get more done in the day. You can remove some of the redundancy. You can introduce automation where you see fit, and you can onboard new users with guardrails and replicate success.
Do you have any advice for our viewers or things to consider when evaluating a TMS?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important that your TMS should fit your workflows and your needs. I also think it's important that that TMS should have a large pool of integration partners that they can access to add and bolt on new tools to provide your users more productivity, more places to go get data they need, more places to improve efficiencies. We're seeing a lot of new and exciting tools come onto the market, whether it's for carrier rating, whether it's for sourcing capacity. Visibility is always top one. So you want to make sure when you're looking for a TMS that it's compatible with a lot of different vendors, and the user experience is something that can be customized.
And regarding a new TMS, do you want to share a little bit about why you stopped by today?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very excited here at Descartes. We're launching our 3rd gen TMS, Aljex Live. It's going to be better user experience. It's going to be faster, more secure. We've instituted some really cool features that allow you to customize your day-to-day workflows, even small details such as being able to change your status colors. So we've really put a lot of time and effort into it, and we would love for everyone to come check it out and get a demo.
So if people want more information about Descartes and about Aljex Live, where can they go?
Yeah, so for Aljex Live, you can go to aljex.com. And for Descartes, you can go to descartes.com. We offer a whole line of different products for the supply chain industry. And you can also find us on LinkedIn as well.
Jesse, thanks again for joining me for this update.
All right, thank you.
Welcome into our discussion today with XPO. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and joining me is Diana Brown, Senior Vice President of Sales Operations and Customer Experience. Diana, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me today, Isaiah. I'm pleased to be here.
We're really glad to have you, and let's talk about customer satisfaction. It is a key differentiator in today's increasingly competitive market. What are customers demanding from their transportation partners today?
Interestingly, customer expectations are very similar. The baseline expectations are deliver my shipment on time, deliver it damage-free, provide a fair price, and make sure you provide an invoice that I can easily pay, right? So the expectations are the same, but where you start to see some variability is with customer size. So smaller customers that ship out of 1 or 2 of our service centers, they're really looking to develop those relationships with our customer service representatives, with our drivers, in person and picking up the phone to talk to each other. Large customers that have hundreds of shipments in our network at any time, it's actually the opposite. They're looking to have real-time information and updates in their systems, right? So that's deep technology integration and making sure that we're passing all the information that they need about those hundreds of shipments. So I would say the differentiation really comes based on customer requirements.
And how can XPO meet the expectations of their customers?
Yeah, again, I would say it starts with the foundation is in our service centers, right? So we've got 1,000 customer service representatives in our about 300 service centers because they're closest to the freight. From there, we look at the customer life cycle. So when you sign on with XPO, we start with customer onboarding. What do you need from us? What do you need operationally? What do you need to make sure that we understand about your business? Do you need trailers and part of our equipment? It's that IT integration again. But this becomes a full project management approach for onboarding for our customers to make sure we meet their expectations. And we've really focused on this for about the last 3 years. And this, Isaiah, is one of our differentiators. We hear that time and time again from our customers. So it's super important to get off on the right foot. And then from there, it's all about, again, understanding the customer's needs. So we have a few customer teams here that act as extensions of the customer's transportation teams themselves. So think about a large consumer packaged goods company that needs to have returns managed. We do that work for them. And on the flip side, if you think about in retail, vendors needing to get their product so that it can get on the shelves in a holiday season like now, we'll actually manage all those vendor pickups, call, make sure they're ready, make sure that they're ready for us to pick up. So someone at our customer doesn't have to do that. So we're working with them daily, weekly, and acting as just extending their team. So ultimately, we want to listen to our customers, make it super easy to do business with XPO.
And to make it super easy to do business with XPO, you have to have people. They're a key component to customer experience. How do you keep your team motivated to ensure a culture of quality?
Yeah, quality is job number one at XPO. It really is. It's woven into the fabric and all the way into our compensation plans, I would say. But for me, it's really thinking about recognition, rewards, and developing your employees. So from a recognition and rewards perspective, we have it on our operations side with something called the Gladiator program. So we're always looking at, moving freight through the network damage-free. And those can be T-shirts and patches and hats and medals. And you can go into our service centers and see the pride when they're all hanging. Each month, those service center gets those awards. Similarly, with our customer service representatives, a lot of recognition, formal and informal program, whether it's on our XPO Go app or on our internal websites or just email, letting people know the great job that has been done and recognizing that and rewarding and also developing. It's LTL can be pretty complicated, and so things can go wrong. When they go wrong, we want to swiftly resolve problems. So we've got a certification program for our customer service representatives that has 4 key pillars. The first one being simply fundamentals of customer service. Second one focused on the operational systems. The third one focusing on kind of the rating and the billing side. And then also just some of the things that happen, making sure drivers are ready and all their information that they need. So making sure we're developing and teaching our employees is super important. But we know it's working with our feedback loops. We listen to customers all the time, and we've got multiple ways we do that. But each week we're getting 100 to 200 responses from a survey that tell us what's working, what's not, and where we need to course correct. So that's how you really make sure the quality's happening.
XPO has really always been at the forefront of industry innovation. How are you integrating technology into your customer experience?
Yeah, so technology is super important at XPO. I'm a tech geek at heart. My first job was coding. I've always reported to Mario Herrick, who was our CIO. So, technology for our customers is super important to us as well. Customers don't always see it, though. It's not always customer facing. A lot of what we're doing is to improve the quality or improve their experience without the tools that they interact with. But let's start with the tools they interact with. Our website, we're continuing to upgrade, add capabilities, make sure we have real-time information. So shipment visibility is super easy, right? And how do we get that in front of customers just in the way they want to consume it? So that's, one of the things we're working on, continuing to upgrade our website, even adding things like paying invoices, payment portals, those kinds of things, making it more consumer-like, frankly. So that's a big effort for us, and we'll continue. Some of the other efforts are behind the scenes, as I mentioned. So even simple things like how you look at your phone systems and how you think about being more proactive based on phone time and where you're getting, how long it's taking to answer phones and those kinds of things. And just making sure you're using that in a very proactive way so you're able to get a great customer experience there. But probably the most impactful example that I can give you of brand new technology that we've developed in the last 6 months is an internal tool asked for by our operations team. So you have thousands of trailers moving through our network every day, being touched by lots of different service centers. And they wanted to rate each other and start to gamify it a little bit and to see where we were doing well and where we had opportunities to improve. So our tech team developed a quick little app, got it out there, and there were 3-star ratings and 1 time in the trailer, and that's moved to 5-star ratings and rating multiple times in the trailer. But what's super important is getting this feedback back to our supervisors so they can talk to dock workers about where we can make improvements. And I guarantee you that in the past 6 months, our quality has improved significantly as a result of this application. So that's probably one of the most fun ones, and just something that the team did quickly and turned around and made a big impact.
And it certainly seems like XPO is one collective or hive mind that's working so that they can better the customer experience for your customers. And it seems like it's really helping XPO to grow their business. Thank you for taking the time and joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Welcome into this technology update presented by DHL Supply Chain. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and I'm joined by Stefan Shablinski, the Vice President of Go Green, and Ted Vallon, the Senior Director of Asset Management. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
It seems DHL Supply Chain is really focused on investing in and developing a variety of new technologies. I've seen your recent announcements about autonomous forklifts, Locust Robotics, and autonomous trucks. And you're here today to talk about electric vehicles. So what are you doing with that technology, and what are your plans? Stefan, I'll let you start things off.
Yes, thanks. That's a great question. So electric vehicles are a key technology for us to reach our carbon reduction targets. The targets as it relates to our own fleet is to make sure that at least 30% of our own fleet will be electric trucks or another alternative to fossil fuel diesel trucks. So that's an important technology for us. And for us, it's important to understand how to deploy this new technology in the future, which is why we started a pilot earlier this year.
So why did you choose this pilot program? How is this going to help with the timeline of your electric vehicles?
Sure, I can take that one. As Stefan mentioned, we're shooting for at least 30% of our fleet to be near zero carbon emission by 2030. That's part of a larger DHL goal over an even longer span of time. We started a pilot with one electric truck that one of our suppliers provided for us to use in one of our operations as a starting point. Once we proved that it would work in our operations, we wanted to take on a larger pilot. So we are in process of putting 12 to 13 electric trucks in operation in about 6 or 7 of our sites across the country in a number of different terrains and climates and types of transportation operations to really test that out and to learn a lot of the things that make EVs a little bit more complicated than the diesel trucks. And we expect to take those learnings and then leverage it for a continued rollout toward that overall 30% target that we have.
Stefan, what would you say is the motivation for the pilot project?
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, we believe that it's really important to be one of the early adopters, to learn as much as we can, to be able to bring this technology to scale in the future. We understand now that it's quite a challenge to deploy electric vehicles, but we believe that it requires a lot of learning and also changing processes, upskilling people in our organization to figure out how to deploy electric vehicles in the future, almost like a standard way of doing business in the future.
So where are you with that timeline? Are you still lining up EV OEMs and evaluating technologies? Do you have any pilot projects right now?
Yes, we are. We're making a lot of progress. We started earlier this year in earnest, first selecting the actual OEMs that we wanted to work with, evaluating our site operating profiles to figure out where EVs could be a fit based on the mileage range and a number of other factors. You have to evaluate charge time available and some other things like that, payload constraints. There are also some considerations around available incentives that help bring the cost down. So we've made all those evaluations. We've also selected some providers to assist us with implementing the charging infrastructure. So that was another round of activity to identify those providers we wanted to work with. And then they went out and performed site surveys to determine the specific infrastructure requirements. And so now we're at the point of kicking off the construction related to the installation of that infrastructure, at the same time finalizing plans to actually take delivery of the electric trucks. There also are work streams around preparing to train drivers, because driving an electric truck is different than driving a diesel truck. So a lot of simultaneous things going on, and we're really tapping into a cross-functional team within DHL, across operations, our Go Green team, our facilities team, and others, as well as tapping into an external network of providers to help accelerate the pilot and really bring other learnings to the table.
You bring up a good point. Most of the technologies you are commercializing are used within warehouses and distribution centers. Electric trucks will be used on the roads. What added challenges does that bring?
Yeah, to Ted's point, I think for us it's really important to figure out the differences between electric trucks and diesel trucks, and there are a lot of differences. I mean, no one thinks about fueling infrastructure for diesel trucks. All of this is available. I mean, this market has had decades to build an infrastructure that is built for diesel trucks, and almost none of this is available for electric trucks. As Ted alluded to, the charging infrastructure we have to build ourselves at our facilities. So there's, at this point in time, no public charging infrastructure for big trucks available that we can make use of. But also when it comes to service and servicing electric trucks, I guess all the service stations available in the country are able to service diesel trucks, but only very few are able to service electric trucks. So all of this infrastructure needs to be built. And that's why when we talk about suppliers, we're actually not talking about suppliers, but partners. We need to have a lot of partners on board to jointly build this infrastructure. And one of the efforts that we have started earlier this year is build this ecosystem of many different OEMs and partners to work together to not only provide the truck, because the truck is not the only element to bring electrification to life. It's the charging infrastructure, it's the service infrastructure, it's the training capabilities to train our drivers, because the driver has a huge impact on the range of an electric truck, because the electric truck is able to regenerate electricity and feed this back to the battery. Depending on the capability of the driver, you can squeeze out another 20% of the range of that battery. So these are all very important elements that we need to piece together. So the purpose of this pilot for us is not to bring out another 10 or 15 electric vehicles and be happy with that. But the purpose of this pilot is really for us to learn how to bring it to scale in the future, to change processes, to build a playbook so that people in finance, in our fleet management, and our operations really understand how to deploy electric trucks almost like as a standard concept in the future, as opposed to being something very special for us.
How are customers going to benefit from this Go Green project?
Sure, they can benefit directly because they are effectively outsourcing their supply chains to us. And transportation, conventional generates carbon. And so part of their goals to reduce carbon come through the services that we're providing. So by DHL taking the initiative to take on these pilots and to, work to convert our fleet, really helps them in their overall carbon goals as well as part of their overall supply chain. And DHL is really taking a position, to be forward and open